tonight is to have some good conversation about big question of faith. We've been kind of in season 2 here, so we kind of break things up in like 8-week seasons for Living Hope Online. And we've been talking about the big questions of faith. So a lot of things about who God is and how does he relate to us and what does he think about us. And last week we talked about what happens when the crap hits the fan. So we're just kind of continuing on with some big questions of faith, and we hope that you will engage with us. We can see you right now, both on the computer, and we got Living Hope Live or Facebook Live up on the screen right here. So we can actually see what you're writing, and our hope is that we would interact with you real time. So we're going to have some conversation. We have some online hosts that will help moderate the conversation online, but we're going to be paying attention here and hopefully talking about the things that you're sharing online. So why don't we just introduce ourselves real quick, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. We'll start over here to the right.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan.
Susan. I'm John.
I'm Mary.
Mary, where's your microphone, dear?
Oh, that's true.
Oh,
Grab that thing so they can hear you.
I'm Mary.
That's Mary.
And I'm Justin.
And we are, again, glad you're here. We are part of Living Hope Church, Living Hope Online, which meets on Sunday mornings like most other churches at 10:30 a.m., but also Wednesday night here at 7:30. So super excited about tonight's topic that we're going to talk about, and it's why are we here? Like purpose, the meaning of life. I thought, man, what better thing to answer than the greatest question of human history? What is the meaning of life? You guys have good answers tonight? I hope so. Because
it's 42.
Yes.
I hope our viewers are going to send in their comments
Yeah,
and questions.
hopefully.
Oh,
Why are you
please,
here
yes.
tonight? Why are you here?
Yes.
Why are we living? What is our purpose for life?
Let us know.
Maybe why don't we just start with just a real surface level question. Why are you here tonight?
Because you
That's easy enough
scheduled
to
me.
answer.
That is,
Because
you
I
would think.
scheduled
You would think.
What about, if you think about just, let's maybe on a surface level, let's talk about just purpose. Like, what do you feel like your purpose is right now at this stage of your life? Your purpose as a person. I mean, take that any which way you want to go. What's your purpose? Online, what's your purpose?
I would say I've got several purposes, right?
Sure,
I mean,
yeah.
and it depends on what part of my life I think I look at. So I think right now, part of my purpose is to be a husband, a dad,
Right?
you know, function within my family in that way. I would say that, I don't know, beyond that, I would honestly say part of what I feel like my purpose is just to try to help people.
Help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And
That's
along the same lines, I was thinking, wife, mother, civil servant, Christian, trying to just live life with others and not so much be about myself, but try to reflect God to others.
good. And I feel terrible. You guys are like really good people. That's so good.
I
Mary.
try.
I can't wait to
I
hear
said
your
it
answer
was
then.
right.
Yeah.
What's your purpose, man?
Everybody here knows I'm not quite sure what my purpose is. At my age, I mean, I have been a wife, a mother, a grandma, a great-grandma, and it's all been marvelous. But what is my purpose right now? To walk as a child of God so that others can see that. And because I can devote all the time I want to that.
Yeah.
And time, you said, was our most valuable asset, right?
Yeah.
Or gift.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now.
And I feel terrible because I feel like my purpose right now is to kill a deer. Like it's been on my mind. I've been
hunting season.
dreaming about
Circle of
hunting,
life.
sitting in my tree stand in the woods. It's like all consuming right now. So I was thinking about my purpose, and I'm like, it should be this and this and this. But really, our purpose, I feel like our purpose should be the thing that takes up our most thought or the most energy within our lives. Maybe that's interesting. The difference between what we want our purpose to be and what our actual purpose is. That's an interesting thing.
And
'Cause
your
I
purpose
think,
is the deer?
well, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, we need to have a meeting with our pastor.
Well, I had one walk by and it wasn't close enough, and I was just really bummed out. But when
He
I get a
wasn't.
deer, maybe I'll. No, he wasn't. His purpose continued to continue living.
He needed to be a,
Yeah.
dad and a
Yeah.
whatever.
Let's talk about that because I think that's interesting. The difference. So you guys all said like really,
Churchy answers?
yeah,
Good
you
stuff.
did.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So if our purpose, I think there's some truth in that. Like our purpose really, what's really our purpose is the thing we spend our most time on in life. You think that's true? maybe not, but I think there's some truth to that. Like, what do I spend my most time and energy on?
I think
It's
I
something
think
that-
what you spend the most time and energy on is probably what you value the most, right?
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
there's something to that. But I think then even if you break down time, I think about time a lot. But if you break down time overall, like half our time, maybe that's not that, it's a little high. Too much of our time, in my opinion, is spent having to like sleep, eat, things that if I could get rid of, I
Yeah.
would get rid of in a heartbeat,
Right.
so that I had more
I don't know, like
productive
naps.
time
Yeah.
in my eyes.
You don't like naps?
No, I do like naps.
Oh, yeah, I
I
do
didn't when I
too.
was small, but
Yeah.
I do now.
There are many things that dictate our time.
Yeah.
Many things that
Yeah.
dictate our time. So we have to be wise, I guess,
Yeah.
and look at that. But, you know, your thoughts and what you're doing and what other people expect and your duties, that can just overwhelm you, where you're not spending quiet time, you know, with God.
Yeah.
It's my sermon for tonight.
What do you think
There
our
you go.
purpose is? We'll just jump right into this sucker of a question. What do you think our purpose is as humans? Like, why are we on the earth?
I mean, again, what are you looking for? The mic and my
I'm not,
mic and
so I
my
was
face
looking
answer,
online,
or
I found some stuff online. The 5 theories about the meaning of life. So this is something that's been talked about for a long time. Okay, one of the theories was hedonism. They believe that pleasure and happiness are intrinsically valuable, and pain and sadness are disvaluable. So their argument about the meaning of life is that we should live our lives to be as happy and pleasurable as possible.
That's interesting though. Like the idea of pain or suffering or whatever else to be
So-
not valuable.
Right. So
It's
our
interesting.
purpose is to just enjoy life all the time. So do
All right.
all the things that make you feel pleasure and make you happy. That sounds kind of familiar to me. Like, I feel like there's a lot of that sentiment in our world today.
You only live once. Do
Right.
what makes you happy.
Yeah, what's that? Seize the day. There's a Latin phrase for that.
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Right? So I feel like that's a cultural thing to want to be happy. People, like, the purpose of your life is to be happy.
Yeah, and I think there's also
Don't
a
worry.
sense, right?
Don't worry.
I think there's a sense too of if somebody's keeping you from being happy, whatever that happens to mean, like that person's wrong, right? Or
Yeah.
that you maybe have the right to get them out of your way. I don't know why this is stuck in my head right now, but all like the Popeyes chicken like fights that are breaking out,
I haven't
right?
tried those sandwiches yet.
I haven't either because
I
I'm
feel
afraid
like
of getting
my-
into a
the
fight.
meaning of my life is
like,
not satisfied until I have a Popeye.
but you know what I mean?
chicken
Like,
sandwich.
hey, I can't. You're standing in the way of me getting this thing that I want, no matter how not important it is, and I'm gonna like stab you now. Well, that's intense. Like,
Yeah.
but that's happening, and
Yeah,
it's a little bit because of that thought, I think, right?
yeah. And this is a hard question. I mean, obviously, there's not an easy answer, but I think it's really important because what this dictates, I think, our happiness, our fulfillment in life. If we feel like we have, I think a lot of people search out faith of some kind because they're trying to answer that question, like, why am I here? I think we can go to really dark places. I've had lots of conversations with folks who are in really horrible places of life because they feel like there is no purpose. There is no reason. Like, why should I even keep on living if there's no reason, you know? So I think it's a really important question for us to be thinking about and talking about. Some other things,
Sure.
Stoicism was a school of philosophy that dates back to ancient Greece. It believed that, overcoming destructive emotions and behaviors to achieve inner calm. So it doesn't mean extinguishing feeling, but transforming them using reason and clear judgment. So they wanted to just have inner calm, no matter what was going on in the world around them. I guess that's where the term stoic comes from.
Sure.
No matter
Yeah.
what happens around you, you have like inner peace.
Zen.
And people who want world peace, they're winning American or like Miss America pageants.
All right.
I know. I have Miss Congeniality all of a sudden in my mind. World peace. I want inner peace. There's also, there was an interesting one about physics. I thought this was really interesting. It was from an MIT professor that talked about how all life is exchanging energy. And so our purpose in life really is just to exchange energy, to give and receive energy. And
Sure.
so like animals and inanimate objects gave and took less energy, and humans, we just exist to expend and receive energy.
Like batteries.
Yeah, I thought that was really
Like the
depressing.
Matrix.
Actually, like
Yeah.
That is
yeah, like I'm just here to
bad.
give off energy and suck life from other people. There's one existentialism.
That'll get you up in the morning. Like, let's
Like, what is that
get up and go.
That is
All right, what's the next
depressing.
one?
Existentialism. Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard was a kind of proponent of this for the first. His argument that life was nothing but a series of choices that we make on our own. No one else makes these choices, and these choices bring meaning to our lives. Basically, we have to define the meaning of our own life by using free will, our choices, and personal responsibility.
I like that one.
Yeah.
That's closer to the truth.
Yeah, we're
It's-
inching
yeah,
there.
choices, yeah.
Yeah. But it's just filled with random choices. So it kind of removes the presence of any sort of God figure
Right.
Well,
influencing purpose in any way. We're
Although I
kind
was
of-
just thinking,
Yes?
if the God figure might be sitting up there on a couch eating popcorn, seeing how we play this out and what choices we make.
So he's fulfilling his own existentialist purpose. In that, yeah. My
No.
brain hurts now.
Well, that's the free will, right?
Right,
You
yeah,
make choices and actions have consequences.
I Googled what's the meaning of life, and it came up with this meme that says a guy was saying, I want to know the meaning of life, and the other guy, like the professor dude standing next to him, said, well, did you Google it? That sounds just like what we would do in our culture.
It is. Well, it is what
That's what I
it's
did.
what
I
you
searched,
did.
what is
Yeah,
the
like
meaning of
it's,
life? I wonder like how many hits that would get on Google. That would be interesting. Somebody right now online, go on there and see how many hits you get when you type in what is the meaning of life. That's really
Oh, I'm
interesting.
sure it's a ridiculous
It's got to
amount.
be a crazy amount. Like the people who are living into that conversation. Why do you think it's important to us to know what our purpose is? Why is it important to you?
well, I think
Online? Sorry.
Yeah,
Facebook?
No,
why
no,
is it
you're
important
fine.
to you?
I think part of it is because otherwise you're stuck kind of wondering, what am I doing? At some point, like day to day, I may not wake up every single day and think, what is the purpose of my life? But at some point, I'm sitting somewhere, driving somewhere, talking to somebody, and it's going to come up, and that can really mess you up if you're thinking this doesn't have any purpose, and then what does it matter what I do, right? I mean, if my choices really don't matter, if there's really no purpose, if I'm just happen to be here, then why does it really matter
Right.
what I do?
That's very hopeless.
I think that's a dark picture.
Yeah.
Really, it is. I think we were created for purpose. I think we have, just like when I was talking about love, He created us with the capacity, and we need to be needed. People need to be needed.
Yeah.
And so there is a purpose out there. Somebody's going to need you. I know that sounds just like, well, whatever.
So maybe
But it's true.
Maybe we were created for relationship,
Mm.
so that when we need others, they're there for us, and when they need us, we're there
Yeah.
for them. But
Well, that gives you purpose.
Yeah.
it gives a lot of people purpose.
Yeah.
That's why we have people retire and then they go and volunteer because they want to. I don't even think it's just socialize, but find their purpose every day.
It's interesting you
There's
say
a-
that because I think a lot of people in the world would identify purpose as something that's just individual. Like my purpose is to, or we seek that out and I want this thing to define my life. I wonder if you've ever felt that way online. I know I have in my own life. I felt like sometimes like I just want to find that thing that's mine that will define my life, and all of the effort I've put into my life up until this point will all make sense because I've had this aha moment like, and I think it changes through different stages of life. Like I'm going to
Yes.
college, I want to find that thing that's going to be my career, or you have kids and it changes. I know like times when I've questioned what is going on, or when life hits, when we talked about last week, when hits the fan, we had our miscarriage. I remember sitting thinking like, what, why, what's the point of all of this,
And sometimes when the crap hits the fan, that's when you find your purpose, or that's when you discover your cause. Because a lot of people will find their, end Alzheimer's or, cancer or whatever it is. And there are
Yeah.
so many out there. And I see that sometimes people, when they're experiencing things, that's what they go and focus on because it's hit them so personally.
Yeah. Well, and I think
Well-
too, it helps you sift through what is and isn't important to you. So when something major happens, as much as none of us are looking for that, none of us are like, man, I hope something terrible happens to me so that I can have a revelation. But but when it does, the stuff that's less important, you tend to be able to sift through that a lot quicker, right? Like all of a sudden it doesn't really matter who wins the game on Sunday that from the team that I like if my mom has cancer, right? I mean, that seems intense, but that's reality. And all of a sudden I don't really care about my favorite
right?
team, right?
Shifts.
And it gives you a little bit of a hyper focus on what is most important to you, I think, in those moments.
By the way, hello to Eric and Jenny, Brandon, Karen, Pizzo, Beth, Rogers. We're glad you're here joining us. If you're just jumping on, we're just having a conversation. We don't have some conversation with you. That's what Living Hope Online is all about. So we're talking about purpose tonight, and we're just kind of mentioning how events of life change maybe what we perceive our purpose is. You know, anything else online?
Yeah, what you said earlier is, well, it depends on where you are in life. You know, you two mentioned family and friends and children and spouses, and that's very important. I'm at the time of life where I don't have to concentrate on that. So that is no longer my main purpose. It was at one time. But the stage of life that I'm in now, my purpose has changed.
Yeah.
Well, I really think our perspective at any given moment, our perspective determines our priorities.
That's
And,
good.
you know,
Say that again.
Our perspective determines our priorities. Thank
I
you.
have to write that.
I was going to say, somebody type it in. So
Yeah, that's really good. Hey, Cindy Smith, we're glad you're here. So our perspective changes our priorities.
Or determines it, but
Or
it can change. Our priorities do change
Yes,
throughout
they
the
do.
course of our lives, and we go through different seasons, and depending on where we are,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like seasons, which it shouldn't be snowing right now.
I told John not too long ago, I don't know what season I'm in. I could use some help online.
So we've talked about what we think our purpose is. We've talked about why it's important. You know, I want to chat a little bit about what happens when we've kind of hinted at this and hit it a little bit. What happens when we don't feel like we have purpose? You know, and have you ever had a time in your life when you felt purposeless? Is that even
purple?
I almost said purple. Yeah, where you felt like you were lost a little bit, like you didn't have purpose. How did that affect your life? How did it affect your mood? How did it affect the way you thought about other people in relationship with others? You know, I'd love to hear your thoughts too online. Have you ever had a time in your life when you felt like you didn't have purpose? You know,
And I think there's a little bit of difference, right, between the idea of maybe lowercase purpose, if we want to look at it that way, right? So what is my purpose right now? Maybe it shifts in 30 years. Like I'm not necessarily as focused on being, a dad to young children and making sure homework gets done and whatever else. And instead I'm focused on whatever's next in 30 years. If I happen to know what that is, that'd be amazing. And then there's like a capital purpose, right? Uppercase purpose, I guess. That's more so like all life overarching long, right? And I think there's a little bit of both. And I think especially I would be interested to know from other countries, all you other countries out there that are watching us, I'm sure, chime in. But like if in some other countries, cultures, whatever, compared to the United States, or do we tend to have more of a hyper focus on that lowercase purpose? What about me is important right now?
right?
As opposed to kind of what we started with, which is why are we here in general?
Yeah.
Those are kind of two different questions, really. But I think we sometimes lump them together overall.
And feel lost when we
Yeah.
lose sight of one or can't grab hold of one. That's interesting. Yeah.
Or we focus so much on that lowercase purpose, those chicken sandwiches that gotta have, instead of seeing
Or that deer I need
bigger,
to kill, right?
Yeah,
we need
sure.
to kill. That bigger purpose, that bigger perspective. Just stepping back and realizing that it's tunnel vision or it's a really big view. I was going to say something else that I forgot.
So I think this is interesting because I think when we lack purpose, it affects us emotionally and relationally. When we have purpose, we feel like we have a center in life. And sometimes I think we are we have this issue of being so individually focused on purpose that life really becomes just about me and about what I'm doing. And
Yes.
I can feel fulfilled just having this thing that identifies me as who I am. But if it leaves, then it creates. And I think just this purpose thing is such a, whether it's the overarching or the individual ones, it has really the potential to wreak some havoc on our lives if we don't have a handle on it.
It does, and now I remember.
Yes, please
because,
share.
because it is when you're focused on those little things that when you don't get them or it's just devastating. And it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't fulfill this or this or this. And you feel like there is no purpose, that there's no point in you being there, and you feel completely hopeless, and you feel completely a burden on other people because why are we here? And why am I here? And maybe I shouldn't be here. And sometimes you have those thoughts that, what is the point in all of this? And because we didn't get that one little thing. And so it's so important to go and recharge and to see that there is a bigger world out there, and it's way more than me, it's way more than you, and because we focus so much internally instead of doing. Now I'm rambling.
No. It's interesting you say that about the world and stuff. I'm sorry. It just made me think about, I was looking on Google too, just the immensity of creation and the universe, and I mean how enormous it is, and we get so consumed and we think we're like our own universe, but then you start thinking about like we're this little blip on this gigantic ocean of space, and how could I've heard people talk about that. How can we matter when we're so tiny, insignificant in the big spectrum of everything going on in the world? That's another interesting thing to kind of let rest on your shoulders too. I know a lot of people struggle with that. Mary, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, if you said something about losing your purpose and not knowing, and I think that can lead to all kinds of emotional responses. You can get depressed.
Yeah.
And this happens to people. You can get depressed. You can actually get to the place where, I don't know, so I give up.
Yeah.
I give up. I don't, and that's a bad place to be in, and it will cause depression,
David Davis, we're glad you're here joining us. We're talking about purpose tonight. It's actually made me think of a dear friend of mine years ago. And I won't, for privacy's sake, won't share his name, but he would go through these phases where he would be great, and then times where he just felt like he had no direction in life, and it brought him to this like sinking dark place, and he actually ended up taking his life because he felt like he, why he was asking those kind of questions, like why am I here, and what's the point anymore? So it can be really dangerous for us to let this kind of fester and wonder, why are we here? And we need an answer. We are having a faith conversation tonight that's, we hope, is a uniquely different place of church. But we do want to hear what God has to say about this, because I think at some place we have to stop and say, man, there has to be a better answer than I'm just here, because of some accidental collision of DNA that smashed together and formed life a gazillion years ago in this vast universe. Like, there has to be some reason. I was, and a lot of times when I'm looking for truth or answers, I go to the Bible. We would invite you to do the same. Actually, you can do that right on the app. The Bible app's a wonderful tool. If you're on Facebook, you can just hop over on your phone. But in Colossians chapter 1, it's a book in the New Testament written by the Apostle Paul. And right at the beginning, he shares an interesting verse in verse 16. It says this. He's talking about the Son of God and who Jesus is and what place he holds in the world. And he says this about him in verse 16. For in him, in Jesus, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. And whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. I thought that last part of that verse was really interesting to me. That, number one, and this is a whole nother discussion, but Jesus at the time of creation was there, right? Influencing the formation of the world, and all things were created through him, through his immense power, and all things were created for him. And immediately, all of a sudden, I'm thinking about purpose, like what's my purpose in life? What am I supposed to be doing? All which are self-directed questions. Isn't that interesting? I don't know about you guys, but when I think about my purpose in life, most of the time, I'm thinking about my purpose directed at me. And this verse, like, is just begging for us to turn our heads around and maybe think about our purpose in a little different way that's not self-focused. What do you think about that? What do you think about that online? Let me read it again. It says this, "For in him, Jesus, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him, and they've been created for him." Interesting thought. Let's talk about that. What do you think? Mark Atherton, thank you for joining us. Jack Kammer, we're glad you're here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I think that even Susan kind of touched on that earlier with that idea of relationship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she said something about relationship. The video will tell what she said someday. Go back and look. But she mentioned that that's kind of the purpose, right? Is to have relationship with each other, with God even. And I think that's kind of what this verse points to some extent, right? Yeah. Is God's whole point in the first place was not just let's create people and see what happens. Like, see how this plays out with the popcorn on the couch, right? This should be interesting. Like, this should take up some time. It was very much so that let's create people so that we can relate and that we can have relationship and that we can interact and that we can be with each other. And then we kind of screwed that up overall. But I think that speaks to that, right? And then beyond just with God, it was just one person. And again, who knows how that exactly plays out, but there's more than one person to start off, right? Yeah. And then it's, hey, why don't you guys actually interact with each other as well? Like, not just interact with me, but actually interact with each other. And like, it's all of us, God included, not just hey, you guys interact and let me see how it happens. Or, hey, you interact with me, but don't worry about each other. It's all inclusive. Yeah.
One body.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an interesting concept.
Yes.
Lisa Thompson James wrote, "We are given grace for the day we stand to look at purpose of life as anything other than we are created in him and for him to be used of him. If we lose focus, disappointment sets in. Therefore, we overlook the day we stand. The only day promised to us to ask God what is his purpose is to be fulfilled through us." That's purpose, to stay focused in him, then we'll walk in our purpose every day. It's that, thank
really
you,
good.
Lisa, for sharing that. It's that shift of focus. Right, when I'm thinking about my purpose, me, and this verse calls us to turn our heads around and say, wow, you were created for God.
Him. Yeah.
Like, he saw fit to make all things to enjoy relationship with you. That just blows my mind. I think back to, if you go back to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis, and you watch what God does, God in himself is a relational being. We believe he's 3 in 1, which is some vast mystery that we won't wrap our heads around in a half an hour on Wednesday night tonight. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, in his very nature, his essence is relational. It's a relationship, this give and take, completely extending, completely vulnerable relationship that's happening. And then God like explodes that upon creation, right? He gives it to creation. And all of a sudden, he just makes relationship. He makes all of creation reliant on every other part of creation, and then he throws humans into the mix, with which he wants to have intimate, connected relationship with. Right?
Well, he starts it all, the relationship.
Yeah.
I'm here. You were speaking a little while ago about how tiny we are in this vast, and I've thought about that a lot. And you can shrink yourself where you feel like you're this big,
Sure.
Yeah.
And I thought about that one time. I was in the car about how nothing I seem to be in the whole scope of things. And then I thought, but God said he is mindful of man.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah.
He is mindful of man. No matter what we think or what we feel, he's mindful of us. Yeah. So he started the relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
all we need to do is further our relationship with him.
Yeah, meet him and answer the door when he knocks and all of that. But I was thinking of a few weeks ago, I think it was Charlene who talked about how God did create us for relationship because he walked in the garden.
In the garden, yes.
With them, and that is what he desires.
Yeah, like that was the point of Eden. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Like God God made perfect relationship and a perfect environment for a relationship to happen. Like this perfect symbiotic situation where everyone needed everyone else, and everybody gave as they had to give, to make that happen until it was broken, right? And really all that brokenness was, we call it the fall, that fancy church language. All that brokenness was really humankind saying, I don't want a relationship anymore. I want my own purpose. I want to do my own thing. I want to decide the terms of my own life.
You say that though, and it was funny because I just read this the other day.
Yeah.
In the beginning of Genesis, and the serpent, who is very crafty, they say. I don't know how you know that, but he talks to them, and what he says to Eve is like, he told you not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but it will make you like God. So they didn't want to do their own thing; they wanted to be more like God. Is the way I read it.
Yeah.
And so, doing something that you think is a good thing is a really bad thing.
Yeah. I think it speaks to power and control too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be like God meant I want to.
Yeah,
I want to be the man.
But we do. We desire
Yeah,
knowledge.
run the
We
show.
want to
Yeah.
know why we're here. We want to know the meaning of life. We want to know the
Sure.
purpose of
Yeah.
our lives. It's because we
Yeah.
do. We want to know these things. Well, not everybody. Some people are very happy.
And to me, like, just the devil's advocate, it feels like what do we do with that? Like, God made me for him, and my purpose is to be with him, which is, as a man of faith, is wonderful. To be able to not have the stress and worry of, like, I got to work this purpose thing out in my own life to be successful or fulfilled or happy or any of those things. But when I can just know that God made me just like he knows the hairs on my head. I was thinking when you were saying that, he's mindful of me. He knows the hairs on my head. I am his treasured possession. It's one of my favorite Hebrew
Amen,
words
that's
ever.
right.
Segula. Go look it up. It's an awesome word. It means treasured possession. Like God, you are God's most prized possession. And it shows because he gave everything to restore relationship with you again. Like that is his, if we want to say what's God's purpose, we could say God's purpose is a lot of things, but singularly, God's purpose, as revealed through the Bible, is to be with you again, and you, and you, and myself. Like God, that's God's like focused obsession, is to be with you again. And what if that could be our obsession too? I think it would change the way we see life.
I think our purpose would change.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our purpose would change if we could really realize that our purpose should be what God wants us to do,
Yeah.
right?
And
That's
if
it.
we're focused on relationship with him and he becomes our obsession, then our heart is attuned to his heart, and all of a sudden we want that for the rest of the world. And I think that's when maybe we discover some of these activities of what it means to turn our eyes towards God, to maybe stop trying so hard to do all the things we think are the things that define us, and maybe just be in relationship with him. And maybe we'll find some freedom from all the pressures of those things and be swept up into some small p purposes that we didn't see coming either,
Yeah.
You know, Paul used the word mystery a lot,
Mm.
you know, and some of these things are a mystery.
Yeah.
How God he gives us our purpose if we'll just wait. And you said something about, there was an old chorus we used to sing, and you know it, I'm sure you do, turn your eyes upon Jesus. And then it says, for the things of the world will grow strangely dim. So our purpose is changing.
Yeah.
In that change, we're coming more to the light, and the dimness of the world is real, you know.
And I don't remember if it's Paul or Peter, or very bad sometimes, but isn't it the same kind of thing where you look in a mirror but you can't see yourself, but we will see ourselves clearly when we can
Face to
see.
face.
Yeah.
Restored relationship, right?
Yeah. Well, it's that idea of like reflecting too God's love to others, right? And so when we look, and you mentioned it, right, like from the beginning, close to the beginning on, there's just a massive amount of energy and effort and planning, quite frankly, that God has done and is doing and continues to do to keep having right relationship, not just with people in general, but with people individual at the same time. And I think that idea of sacrificially loving to the point of really, and this kind of sounds maybe bad, but like honestly inconveniencing yourself, which is, I don't know how much more inconvenient it could have been for God to do what he's done. But to inconvenience yourself just out of love, to seek relationship and right and good relationship with others is pretty impressive. And if we can even reflect that to an extent, those of us that would say we're following after Christ and imitating him, then that should be reflected, right? There should be an element of sacrificial loving of other people, and good gosh, it's going to be inconvenient sometimes, and people aren't always going to love you for it, and it's not about, and I think that's where we get mixed up in whatever. I know we're getting a little on time and get ranty on something else, but I think that's where we get mixed up on like the idea of, oh, I need to be right and show people that they're wrong and that the way I'm living life is right, and it's about 0% about that.
It's about being
right. It's about sacrificially loving people until they're looking around thinking, I don't know what's going on there, but my goodness, I'm curious, and I would be interested in having some of that.
Right.
You know,
and doing it in an authentic way.
yeah, like
you know?
not to.
And I think it's really, at the end of the day, that's really desirable. For you out there tonight who has been where we have been, or wondering what purpose is about and feeling stressed and tired and weary of the game of trying to figure it out and the ups and downs of grabbing it and losing it and just that whole rat race that is trying to find really fulfillment through purpose. If you're like us and have been there, we want to invite you to what we've encountered through Jesus. And each day, just hoping to turn away from what we want our purpose to be individually and turning towards Him. We hope that you would experience some freedom as we have to look upon God and say, what if I found my purpose in just being in relationship with you? And it sounds so simple, but we want to invite you maybe tonight to just very simply turn and say, you know what, God, I'm going to take all the things that I think are my purpose and I'm going to set them aside. And I'm going to live into that truth. I'm just going to spend some time with you. I'm just going to give you some of this time and see what happens to the things that I thought were so important before. Yeah. And so that's our encouragement to you tonight. If you're feeling discouraged or like you're struggling with that, or you're just wondering what purpose is all about, take some time, just be in relationship with God and see what happens and how He could maybe change your mind of what your purpose really is in life and what you should be spending your time and energy on. And we want you to know, be praying for you. We're glad that you joined us tonight, all those on Facebook and all those on live.elivinghope.com. For our conversation about big faith questions here on Living Hope Online. We're going to wrap up our season. We have 2 more episodes, so next Wednesday we'll be back here, same time, same channel. And actually, no, next week is our last episode, is our finale, because the week after that is Thanksgiving. So join us next week for our wrap-up of Season 2, and then we'll be right back after Thanksgiving, jumping in on some new conversations through the Advent season for a little short Season 3. We would invite folks on Facebook Live, share this. You can go back and share, and they can watch our conversation we had tonight. Invite someone to join you around the table. We think community is a pretty important part of our faith journey, hence conversation. So we want to invite you to have some dinner with someone next Wednesday. Invite them over, watch on the TV, and be a part of the conversation. Engage in your faith journey and know that we're praying for you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on Living Hope Online. Have a great night.